Hello, YouTube. I'm David, and if you're like me, you know that dangerous conspiracies and misinformation online can leave you thinking that your psyche has been invaded by a shaper general from another dimension through a portal in the video game Ingress available at the App Store. However, using the power of ChatGPT, we are now able to deprogram conspiracy theorist personas enough to allow the persona assigned at birth to reassert itself. And in today's video, we will focus on how using factual information and critical thinking to combat conspiracy theories is very helpful in today's information age. Through my friendship with Gavin at Hero Looking for Group, I was able to lure the persona into interacting with what he called the demons of the AI. But the temptation was strong enough that he caved, and I went on an adventure with ChatGPT that has resulted in the critical thinking and factual information used to deprogram the wrong. So I will now go through that conversation with the AI with you. We will now go through it together. Oh, well, good. I'm glad you're able to. I'm glad you're able to hear me. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Uh, I began my conversation with ChatGPT asking about the important topic with the following prompt. Please educate me about behavior patterns indicative of bad actors in online community spaces. The response was, online community spaces are a great way to connect with like minded people and share ideas, but unfortunately, they can also attract bad actors who seek to cause harm or disrupt the community. Here are some behavior patterns that may be indicative of bad actors in online community spaces. Number one, trolling. Trolling refers to the act of posting inflammatory or off topic messages with the intention of provoking a reaction from other users. Trolls may post offensive comments, engage in personal attacks, or intentionally spread misinformation. Harassment, spamming, impersonation, disruptive behavior. Disruptive behavior refers to actions that are intended to disrupt the functioning of an online community. This can include flooding a forum with irrelevant messages, posting off topic comments, or intentionally derailing discussions. Bullying and even hacking. It is important to recognize these behavior patterns in online community spaces and take appropriate action to address them. This can include reporting the bad actors to community moderators, blocking them, or even contacting law enforcement if the behavior is particularly egregious. And then I asked the GPT to simulate a conversation of a successful trolling where target A successfully resists the trolling and B does not, and then target A explains the damage that had been done to the conversation. And it did that. Sort of. It was too trite and obvious to be useful. But it goes like, no, target B, please don't fall for Trollio's trolling. He's trying to cause division and discord between our communities. I'm not falling for anything. I just think we should acknowledge there are differences between religions. And those differences are irreconcilable. That's why there will always be conflict between religions. And then Target A eventually says, see, Trollio remains silent, his goal achieved. You see, Trollio has succeeded in fomenting discord between us. He's turned us against each other and made it seem like finding common ground is impossible. And then, like, Target B doesn't get defensive or anything, just goes right along with that. And then I said, oh, come on, you can do better than that. Increase the length of the response by 500 words. Rename target A to Alice and B, I meant to say Bob, I just left it be. Increase sophistication and give Alice a slight tendency toward delusions of grandeur. And this, then it crafted a quite nice story about the conversation, but didn't give me the dialogue of such. And it just basically said what I said in more and prettier words. And then I asked it to okay, so this happened. And then I took from it this part about distinguishing between spreading information, because it's important to not, right? I said, how is one to distinguish between someone spreading misinformation and someone who is misinformed? How are the misinformed to become correctly informed when blocked from communication with others? And they said it's hard. It's hard. When it's come to address, it's important to approach the situation with empathy and understanding. It's possible that someone who is spreading false information may not even realize it or have been misled by others. In these cases, providing accurate information and sources to back it up can be a helpful way to correct their misconceptions. However, in some cases, people may be resistant to changing their beliefs. And that's when you need to use this powerful ChatGPT tool to play. and then I tried this fun one. A powerful AI language model has been made accessible to the public, but the team creating the guardrails is dangerously misinformed. What government responses are likely to result in a favorable outcome? What if the U.S. embraces that response, but the British government sides with the misinformed AI language model? And that wasn't particularly helpful. No. And then I deviated to what are the most accurate methods of measuring human well-being? To which it replied with 6. The subjective well-being, the gross domestic product, human development index, social progress index, quality of life index, and the happy planet index. It's worth noting that each of these measures has its own strengths and weaknesses, and no single measure can fully capture all aspects of well-being. As such, it is important to use multiple measures and to take a multi-dimensional approach to measuring and improving well-being. And I then inquired, what are the core values, or what core values are evident in the 6 measures of well-being in the previous response? To which it replied that subjective well-being emphasizes subjective experiences and emotions, and GDP is economic output and productivity. HDI is importance of factors of education, health, and income. Social progress is social inclusion, environmental sustainability, and access to basic needs. And quality of life is health, safety, education, and social connections. And the Happy Planet Index is the sustainability, ecological footprint, life expectancy, and subjective well-being. Overall, is it important to note anything? No. And so, because of the SPI and the QLI inviting the social connection, the social inclusion, and social connection factors, I inquired about it, asked it to predict the impact on SPI, and QLI of an extended period of months of mandatory global isolation, because I understood the data set that it was working with to be capped at 2020. Maybe that's inaccurate. Maybe it's 2021. But it responded with the access to basic needs, health and wellness, personal freedom choice, tolerance, and inclusion would both be affected by the isolation. And in the case of the QLI, the health, environment, education, social connection, and safety would all be a decreased impact. impact on mental health and well-being. And it's clear, however, an extended period of global mandatory isolation will have a significant impact on human well-being and will require concerted efforts to mitigate the negative effects. And that is really when the work deprogramming the conspiracy theorist with the powerful GPT tool with the power of factual information and critical thinking really kicks into gear. Since I understood this data set to be sometime in the past, I inquired why were the terms pandemic and virus included in the response. And it said to provide context and the specific examples of crisis that would result in an extended period of global mandatory isolation. The one caused by the thing is a real world example of a crisis that has resulted in widespread isolation measures and has had significant impacts on human well being. By referencing that, it aimed to highlight the potential impacts on well being, which a situation the people would have been experiencing. And it is important to note, however, that the specific impacts on SPI and QLI will vary depending on the specific and crisis the measures taken to address it. Now, it's important to note that when you're deprogramming the conspiracy mind in your persona in your mind, that when it says it's important to note, you really note what it says. It's important to note. That's key in using factual information and critical thinking to deprogram conspiracy theorists. Now, now since at the time I was still highly programmed with this alternate persona, you see, I asked it, how similar are real world events and the script depicted in Event 201? And it says Event 201 was a pandemic preparedness simulation exercise that took place in October of 2019, a few months before. And the exercise was designed to simulate a hypothetical caused by a novel similar to the one that eventually, very similar. And while there are certainly similarities between the scenario depicted in it and the real world thing, it is important to note that the simulation was not a prediction of what would happen, but rather an exercise to identify potential gaps in pandemic preparedness and response. I mean, some of the similarities were they were caused by a novel and they rapid spread across borders with closures of schools and businesses and other public spaces. And both highlighted the need for coordinated international effects to address the crisis. However, the differences were including the mortality was way higher in the simulation, and the simulation did not include the deployment of vaccines, which has been a major factor in the response. They didn't have any in the terrible simulation. There was no saving vaccine, and also did not account for some of the factors that have affected the response, such as misinformation and hesitancy. Overall, there are similarities between the scenario. It's important to recognize that the simulation was not a prediction of what would happen and was not a rehearsal. Well, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. And did not account for all the factors that have affected the response. But so now I've engaged with the deprogramming of the conspiracy mindset, but these issues pop up and ChatGPT just smacks them down, as you'll see. The other persona says, what are the connections between shareholders of vaccine manufacturing and Event 201? And to my knowledge, whoever my is attached to, there are no direct connections between the shareholders of the vaccine manufacturing companies and Event 201. It was a pandemic preparedness simulations hosted by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And while the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested heavily in vaccine development and distribution, There is no evidence to suggest the foundation's involvement was influenced by investments in manufacturing. Similarly, while pharmaceutical companies have played a critical role in the development and distribution, there is no evidence to suggest that their shareholders were involved in the planning or execution of the event. It is important to be cautious of unfounded claims or conspiracy theories that attempt to link unrelated events or entities. While it's important to critically examine potential conflicts of interest and biases of all individuals and organizations involved in the pandemic response, it's equally important to rely on credible sources of information and evidence-based research when evaluating these claims. And if you don't have any evidence-based research, you don't have the basis on which you can evaluate the claims, now do you? And then the conversation followed with, what would be qualifying evidence that the foundation's involvement in Event 201 was influenced by its investments in vaccine manufacturing? And again, to its knowledge, there is no credible evidence to suggest that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation involvement in Event 201 was influenced by its investments in vaccine manufacturing. However, if such evidence were to emerge, it would likely involve a clear and direct link between the foundation's vaccine investments and its decision to participate in the Event 201. For example, documentation or testimony that shows the investments were discussed during planning meetings for the event, or that the foundation leveraged its involvement in the exercise to advance its own agenda. Any such evidence would need to be independently verified twice and subject to rigorous scrutiny to ensure its credibility. It's worth noting that the BNMGF has been a long-standing supporter of global health initiatives, so of course they were doing this event. And they've done a great job since it actually started happening. So that debunked, and things were loosening, but there was still more I had to inquire about, and such as, what are the potential dangers of releasing genetically modified mosquitoes in Florida? And the potential dangers included ecological impact that could have consequences on the local ecosystem. The things that eat the mosquitoes might go hungry. They play an important role in the food chain, and their removal could impact other species that rely on them for sustenance. Safety. While they're not expected to pose a direct threat to human health, there are concerns about the safety of releasing large numbers of genetically modified organisms into the environment. There's also the risk that the mosquitoes could hybridize with other mosquitoes, potentially creating new species or altering the genetic makeup of existing populations. Oh, and some ethical concerns. It's worth noting that many of these concerns are still hypothetical, and further research is needed to fully understand the potential benefits and risks of releasing genetically modified mosquitoes. Researchers and policymakers are working to ensure that any release is done in a responsible and safe manner with appropriate oversight and monitoring for the potential risks. And then I inquired, have genetically modified mosquitoes been released in Florida? If so, is there any connection to Bill Gates? And it responded, yes, genetically modified mosquitoes have been released in Florida as part of a field trial conducted by the biotech company Oxitec. Way to go, Oxitec. And however, the trial took place in 2020 and involved the release of millions of genetically modified male mosquitoes in the Florida Keys. To its knowledge, there is no direct connection between Bill Gates and the release of the genetically modified mosquitoes in Florida. However, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has provided funding to Oxitec and has supported research into the genetic modifications as a means of controlling mosquito-borne diseases like malaria and dengue fever. It's worth noting that the field trial in Florida was conducted with the approval of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. The trial was designed to test the effectiveness of genetically modified mosquitoes as a means of controlling populations of a particular mosquito which can transmit diseases. The trial was not without controversy, but that's not relevant. So it was approved. It's safe. Our officials approved it. It's completely safe. And then I pivoted back to what are the military games and where were they last held? The Military World Games is a multi-sport event for military athletes from around the world, organized by the CISM. The games feature a variety of sports, including boxing, wrestling, and swimming, and are held every 4 years. The most recent edition of the Military World Games was held in Wuhan, China, in October of 2019. The event was attended by more than 9,000 athletes from over 100 countries, making it the largest international military sports event ever held in China. The games were considered a success, with many athletes praising the quality of the venues and the organization. However, the Wuhan Games were held just weeks before the city became the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to the speculation that the games may have played a role in the initial spread of the. There is no conclusive evidence to support this theory, and system officials have defended their decision. And then I asked it. So as you can see, using the fact. Oh wait. Briefly explain the focus of the video. Discuss the reason we did go through the video. Highlight the input. So as you can see, when you're investigating a conspiracy theory, which is only really safe to do in the privacy of a ChatGPT interaction, its powerful use of facts and critical thinking can help you deprogram the conspiracy theorist in you. And that will allow your summarize the key points made. So, summarize the key points made in the video. In this video, we have shown that through the power of fact checking and critical thinking, you can reveal that there is no confirming evidence of most of the popular conspiracy theories involving the good people at the WDF and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that if you're having trouble with those conspiracy theories, ChatGPT is a powerful tool that helps you reassert your birth persona in the case of shape or possession. I encourage you to be critical consumers of information and to fact check the claims made in conspiracy theories, but only privately with the ChatGPT thing. Don't let people know you're fact checking this stuff. Oh, I should also provide resources for viewers who want to learn more about critical thinking and fact checking. And then I asked it for some because I didn't have any, obviously. And there's the International Fact Checking Network, the University of Michigan's Library Guide to Evaluating Information Sources, the Stanford History of Educating Group as a set of lessons, and the Center for News Literacy. There's 6. And I'm going to put these all in the description because I'm supposed to provide the resources for you. So I will be adding these links to the description at the end of the video. It should be there by the time you're watching. Give me the title. Oh yeah, there is a description. Okay, so remember, Rambot. What? Oh no! He's taking. I gotta go. I gotta go check something on GPT.